Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. This is Jordan, the Marketing Coordinator here at AIM. Today's webinar will be recorded and then later posted on our website. This does mean that all attendees will be automatically muted so that we get a quality recording. If you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the chat box, and we'll try to answer them throughout the presentation. But if we're unable to get to all the questions, we'll have a member of our marketing team reach out to you individually to make sure you get that answered. Before we get started, we'd like to invite you to join us for our next webinar on Tuesday, September 17th at 9 a.m. Pacific Time. Regional Marketing Director Nisha Catron will guide you through the importance of extended care and all the benefits extended care plans can offer. And with that, I'll hand it over to Derek so that we can go ahead and get started. Take it away, Derek.
Awesome. Thank you, Jordan. And thank you to everybody for being here today. This should be a pretty exciting one, as you can tell just based off the title. Some of these subjects really, you could take an hour getting into all by themselves. Some of them, like sales, for instance, and the conversations behind them, I've spent a week of intensive training from different carriers and companies being flown out just going over. So we're not going to be able to go super, super deep, but the kind of hope here is to give you the highlights, cliff notes, whatever you want to call them, enough information to actually implement some of this into your kind of daily strategy, or at least give you some things to think about, and then give you a starting point of being able to jump into some of these further. So with that, as you can see, I got an agenda here. This is something I normally don't do if you've been on any of my PowerPoints or webinars, but there's a couple reasons for that. One, gives you a little rundown of everything we're going to talk about, but two, it is a great thing if you're not doing it, or maybe you used to do it and you stopped doing it, but an agenda is a really good thing to kind of implement into whenever you're going to be having meetings with customers or clients. You can kind of set the stage of what you're going to be discussing, how long it's going to take, and then, give them an idea of what's going on. It is something that really has helped in a lot of meetings I've had, just to kind of keep things clear of where we're going to be going and kind of what our goal and agenda is going to be as far as what we're trying to achieve with that meeting. So to kick this off, something I'm sure everybody's always, heard out there if you've ever done any kind of sales, and seeing as how most of you are agents, I'm sure you've heard this, right? Everyone says it's a numbers game. If you get in front of enough people, you're going to be able to sell. But is that really true? Yes, right? We all know that you could take someone who's really not very good at sales, and if they get in front of enough potential prospects, they can still do really good in whatever they're selling. Having said that, it is a lot easier to implement some of these tools, techniques, whatever you want to call them, to get a better close ratio on their sales. And one way to kind of look at it that's always stuck in my head, very simple, right? You can cut down a tree with an axe, or you can use a chainsaw, right? So being kind of the not great at sales, just getting in front of hundreds and hundreds of people nonstop, repetitively, one, is going to burn you out pretty quick. But two, it's going to take a long time, right? You're not going to get the same results as if you just went out there and cut down that tree with a chainsaw. And that's kind of why you're seeing this multi-million-dollar business or industry, whatever you want to call it, on just teaching people the secret success to selling, or this or that, all these buzzwords that are flying around, right? And the truth is, there really is no secret, right? Like I said, you could just be extremely determined and hardworking and really not good at sales and still make a killing for a living on selling. Obviously, that's not what you want to do, right? Because you're going to get burned out. You're going to get frustrated. It's going to take a lot longer to get there. And eventually, you are in a geographic area where you're going to run out of clients unless you continue to expand. And a lot of people don't want to be working in states too far away or nationwide, right? It's just a hassle, too many hoops to jump through. So what you're really looking for is not only quantity when it comes to prospects, but quality. And getting into that a little bit further in a minute when we get back to leads and some of these other sources, but just kind of keep that in mind, right? We want quantity and quality, right? And most of you probably preaching to the choir, you're like, duh, that makes sense. But before we get into those leads and everything like that, let's take a step back. So part of that kind of sales success, what you're looking to do, what you're discussing, right? And like I said, you could spend a week with 4 hours a day just going into the different nuances and techniques of how to sell, right? Things like the person who speaks first loses and all this, stuff that's out there. But to break it down, one thing that's always kind of resonated with me, and I've seen it work for hundreds of agents, it worked for myself. It's basically having simple conversations, fact finding missions. Everywhere you work, everyone you talk to calls it something different, but the basic principles are basically the same, right? Of what you're trying to cover, what you're trying to find out from each client. There are some different little key pointers that are good to keep in the back of your head. I'm sure all of you have heard this at some point, right? They teach this if you go do public speaking classes, higher management courses, whatever the case is. It's a lot of things people don't think about, those nonverbal cues. So things like eye contact, using, purposeful gestures with your body, how you're sitting, even things like, if your chair is higher than theirs can convey different meanings. So usually a higher chair would convey power, different things like that. All things to kind of consider when you're trying to set a scene of where you're at. And I'm not going to go into office setup and all that because these are things you can kind of adjust and change. But keeping an idea of what you want your office space or maybe you're meeting in a coffee shop to really say as far as what you're trying to present to the client, right? Using gestures of nodding your head, eye contact, mirroring their body language, right? If they're leaning in towards the contract and really listening to what you're saying, right? Mirroring that, kind of building this relationship non-verbally as well as verbally is very important. And one thing I do want to point out, right? Word choice really does matter. What you're saying and how you're saying it can go a long way. One thing I've seen a lot of agents get caught up on, and it's something we all kind of catch ourselves saying, right, as just a response, is I understand, right? And if you have someone sitting there saying how they just lost their spouse to cancer and it was a horrible battle and all this, and you're like me at 38 years old and you don't have a spouse and you say, I understand, the first thing that goes through their head is probably going to be, do you really? Right? So finding different ways to convey or express, I can only imagine what that would be like, right? Is just something to consider before you kind of start blurting out common responses. It helps kind of, create still that relationship with the customer, but you're not sitting here, just throwing out things that might kind of have them second guessing, right? What's going on? Things like, to be honest with you, right? Well, then they might start to question, were you not being honest before this, right? So kind of find these things that you're saying when you're going through these meetings and kind of maybe tweak them around a little bit and just see how that works for you. As far as the conversation itself, and you guys can kind of read through a lot of these, one of the most important things is listening for keywords, right? Things that are going to help set you up for either closing that sale or allow you to pivot to other areas, right? Because pivoting is a great thing. If you're not doing it, you should be doing it more no matter what you're selling, right? But in order to get there and find out what's going on, and I actually put it twice because it's something you can do over the phone or in person, right? A lot of these things are going to kind of work in both areas. Some of them are going to be a little bit more important. So, for instance, if you're talking to someone over the phone, they're not going to see any body gestures or composure, right? But they will hear the variation in your pitch, the tone inflection, how loud or kind of quiet you're speaking, those kind of things, right? But listening for keywords, you're going to do them both, okay? And you're really going to want to steer the conversation. So when you start off and you're sitting down, and there's going to be some key things that we're going to ask and look for, and we'll get to those in the next slide. But you're really going to want to learn to steer the conversation with open and close-ended questions, right? Things that you know probably what they're going to answer beforehand, ideally, and kind of get them to that point of answering those questions, right? And then, of course, one thing you're always going to want to do at the end, referrals, 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 right? If they seem happy and if they're buying something from you at the end, it probably went well. You can make that as simple or as complex as you want to, right? It can be something as easy as, you know, do you think there's anybody else that would benefit from having a similar conversation, right? Or you can get more in depth with it. But these are kind of just some different things to consider in that meeting that are going to have a lot of, not only verbal response from the client, but as well as nonverbal, right? Things that are just going to help make them feel more at ease, that you're going to be mirroring and doing with them and creating, I hate to say a safe place, right? But somewhere where they're comfortable to get into some of this, because you'll see some of these questions that we're going to try and ask here on this next slide. And some of them do get a bit personal. So just for fun, let's say we have Bob who's 35 years old. He's a male, right? He calls in, he wants term life insurance. I have a list of questions. I do recommend if you're not doing it or you stop doing it, definitely bring a notepad and take notes of, things you're writing down of what they're saying and looking for. Because like I said, there's different areas not only to pivot, but a lot of people today are coming in and saying they need, this product. So one question I love to ask is why, right? What are you looking to get out of this? What are you worried about? Why do you feel like you need this product? Because a lot of people are just seeing this on social media, they're seeing it on news ads, they're hearing from friends, and it may not really be the right fit or the best fit for what they're hoping to get out of it. Okay. Remember, we're the experts here. So we need to kind of figure out what has them looking for this product. Something else I always try and find out, are they married? Do they have kids? Do they have a lot of debt? Any big purchases like a house, cars, right? Not just for the present, but if they had recently done that, if they're planning on doing that in the near future, because all that's going to change a little bit of what we're really trying to place them with. For me, I very rarely ever take a cookie cutter approach of someone calls in and they want term. Okay, I'm going to give you a term, right? I'm going to try and get as much information as they're willing to give me and build that relationship and figure out what's actually going to be the best fit. Right. And then things like their health. Obviously, you want to do some pre-qualification, especially for certain types of products. It's going to come in very handy. Do they have a budget they're working with, right? That's going to be one of your biggest objections is going to be price, no matter what the product is, right? Do they have any other insurance, right? And you don't have to necessarily get into P&C insurance if that's something none of us are touching, but it's good to know what they have. Are there any worries that they have for this product or in general, right, that you're trying to kind of help solve, right? Just getting this information. And for this part of the conversation, I'm usually using a lot of open-ended questions to kind of let them talk and go. And then with what they're giving me, I will start using more closed-end questions to get specifics out of them based off of what they said. One thing we kind of touched on a tiny bit is objections. Finding out what the real objection is to if they're saying no. A lot of times they'll say, oh, I don't have the time, it's this or this or that, whatever the case is. And it may just be something as simple as that's actually out of their budget, but they don't want to say that, right? A lot of people feel embarrassed or they don't want to admit I can't afford that, right? Some of us do. Some of us are very honest and whatever the case is, but some people just don't want to say that. And if you take their first objection at face value without kind of not prying, not digging, not, being too invasive, but just trying to figure out a solution, you're going to lose out on that sale and another agent might get it because they come in with a cheaper price, right? Or lower premium, whatever the case is. And that was their true objection, but you just didn't find out why, right? So being able to kind of steer that conversation is really going to help and figuring out really what's going on. A lot of times in this case, right, if I had a 35-year-old male and I find out they're married and this and this and that, I'm probably not going to do just a term, right? I'm going to find out what their budget is. I'm going to do a term coupled with an IUL or some kind of permanent life insurance, right? And that permanent life insurance would be a lower benefit. So that way we're keeping the overall budget, right, in the same ballpark. but we're giving them something that's going to cover the house or their kids getting old enough to take care of themselves or replacing an income or whatever the case is that they thought they needed that term for, but then give them some kind of permanent life insurance that's going to carry on. And this works with all product lines when it comes to pivoting, when it comes to bundling, whatever you want to call it, right? But if you don't get the information behind it and steer the conversation to that, you're going to be leaving a lot of money on the table for you, and you're going to be leaving a lot of gaps in insurance and, not protecting the client the best you can. So it's really important to get these questions out there. And these are things that I ask in basically every meeting, no matter who I'm talking to, what I'm going through. If you're one of my agents here and you call me, you've probably heard me ask these questions to you about the client, right? What are they looking for? What are they trying to do? What's their goal, right? Because it's going to help you close those sales, because if you're not asking these questions and they're out shopping around, another agent is. And people like it when it seems like you're really catering what you're selling to them. It's not just the next, right? Moving on. So it's something that's going to go a long way with them. And then once you get all these questions, right, you're the expert. You probably know what they actually need after the first couple questions. But instead of just saying, okay, we're going to do this because this is what's best, I'll usually start using kind of information to explain the different types of policies, what's going on. I want them to be comfortable with the different options, right, and know what they are. And then start asking questions that I more or less know what they're going to say, and lead them to, okay, like I said in this example, term and a permanent life, right? Lead them to that kind of pasture and get them there, obviously with my help, but on their own. So that way, when they are like, yeah, that's an option, that I feel like I need to get. I think I need permanent life and term. And then you can kind of simply say, I agree, right? Most people like their own answer, their own conclusion, better than being, force fed the answer by somebody else. There are some people that are coming to you because you are the expert and they want your answer and opinion. But this is where, through this conversation and building information, you're going to kind of read what kind of person they are, right? Do they want you to take the lead, the reins, and get them there? Or do they seem like they kind of want to be not nudged, but, led along with a loose leash and find the answer themselves, and you kind of just come in with the solution, right? If they come to, this is the problem, this is what I need to solve, and you kind of just show up and say, hey, I have a solution for you, or two, or whatever, they're going to be a lot more likely to buy, right? Your closing rate's going to go up quite a bit. And then once again, obviously closing, recap what you're doing, what the plan was, why you're doing it, and then once again, get into those referrals, right? I cannot preach referrals enough. Do not be scared to ask. A lot of agents kind of have done that in the past, or, they pushed it here and there, and then it kind of starts to drop off because, one, if you've been in the industry long enough and doing it the right way, they're just going to come in organically without asking. Two, right, business is doing well enough that they don't really feel like they need to keep asking. But it's something where, once again, you're leaving a lot of, money or business on the table, right? It's there, it's easy to do. It's not really free leads because you're having to work for it and do all this and put time and investment into it, but it's a lead you don't have to go out and buy or pay for. So it's always a good thing to keep pushing that. All right. So as I promised, right, getting into leads and paying for advertising, what's the best route, right? This is a question I have gotten from agents probably more times than I can actually count, right? Should I be buying leads? Where should I be getting them from? What kind of leads are the best? And it's a really loaded question because there's so many variables that go into this. And usually what I'll say is it is case by case, right? It is going to be different from one agent to another based off so many different things. But so we're going to try and answer this as, comprehensively as we can. But obviously, like I said, there's too many ways this can go to give all the answers. So this picture is actually taken from Integrity Leads, which hopefully you guys know is our parent company. We also do have some vendors in-house that we can offer. Integrity Leads has all kinds of discounts they throw out, either weekly, biweekly, monthly, depending on what it is. But there's also a lot of other lead vendors out there, right? So asking all these different questions of what's going on to be able to really answer what you should be doing with your leads, if you should even be buying them, where you should be getting them from. There's a few things you really need to consider as an agent, right? One is, what's your budget? Okay. Because that's going to really limit down what you can buy as far as leads. Are there certain products you're trying to sell, right? Are you trying to work a certain, geographic market, or are you doing the whole state or multiple states, right? Something else that a lot of people don't really dig too deep into is, what's the market saturation, right? Is there a lot of agents trying to push that same product in the same region? Maybe it makes more sense to go to another city. Okay. What demographic are you looking for, right? If you're selling, let's say, Medicare, right, you're probably not going to want to go to a lead source that's going to be giving you a bunch of leads for people who are 30 years old. Not to say they're never going to buy Medicare, but you're probably going to have to wait quite a while. Okay. So taking all these things into consideration, because what you really need to have, no matter who you're buying leads from, no matter where you're getting them from, are metrics. You need to have a way to actually track and find out what your return on investment is, right? What you're actually closing on, what's working, what's not, and be able to come back and kind of readjust as time goes on, right? So you need to have a lot of these questions in mind first before you start jumping into buying leads. And then once you have all this stuff figured out, okay, like I'm going to sell in my home city of Yakima, which is where we're located, right there in the middle of Washington, right? And I'm going to be pushing Medicare, right? And I, have X amount for my budget, okay? I got a starting place. So from there, I can look at what's really going to be most cost effective for bringing on leads and what lead source I want to go to. In this case, we're talking about actually buying leads from a vendor. So with that, not all leads are created equally, okay? And it's really hard to get a nailed down closing percentage because it varies, right? City to city, it varies agent to agent, it varies, what type of product you're selling. There's so many different variables, but these are pretty standard for most agents or lead vendors you're going to check. You're going to be closing about 5 to 25%, right, on the leads you're buying. And like I said, some leads are going to be better than others. When we're talking about aged leads versus fresh leads, all that means is the amount of time they've been sitting in there, how old they are. Are they exclusive versus not exclusive? How exclusive are the not exclusives, right? Are they going to be dished out to multiple lead vendors all around? So you got thousands of agents calling, or is it going to be just that lead vendor site, right? All things to kind of keep in mind when you're looking at the leads you're purchasing. But basically, another thing you really want to do is look at the number of people you're trying to actually close on, how many, apps you're trying to put through, and figure out how many leads you're going to buy so that we can actually really sit down and figure out, okay, if I spend X amount of dollars, I close on this many leads based off of this percentage. This is about what I should be making off that. Does it make sense, right? And this is something you're going to want to keep kind of track on, tabs, sorry, and reassess as you're going forward and adjust, right? Because maybe you're figuring you're going to be closing at 25% and you're actually closing at 5. Or maybe you thought you were, doing all the math that I'm only going to close at 5% and you're closing at 20, right? So buying certain leads are going to make more sense, right? And as you know, the more exclusive and the newer the lead, the more it costs. But maybe you're closing at a 75% ratio on that, and you're only closing it at a 5% on the aged leads that cost you $3, and it's still costing you a lot more money because you're not closing as much, right? Different things that you're going to really want to keep into account and track while you're buying leads. Leads on the phone, right? Going to be a pretty low percentage. You're calling people. It's a lot of cold calling. They're going to get slammed, especially if it's not just an exclusive lead for just you, by probably 10 to 100 phone calls in the first few days, right? So if you don't get them on the phone right away, Your odds of getting them on the phone later are going to significantly drop, right? Leads in person, if you can actually get them into the office, your closing rate percentage goes up quite a bit. Part of that's because they're investing time to actually come in, right? They're more likely to get it versus just being on the phone. Inbound calls, right? And we'll get into kind of how those come later. Better closing percentage, right? Referrals are going to give you the best closing percentage ever. For me, the kind of goal for all agents should be to eventually transition from those lead vendors, leads on phones, into in person, into inbound calls, into referrals, because it is going to give you your best return on investment. Right. So like I mentioned, inbound calls, referrals, generating your own leads. There is a lot of ways to go into this, right? Local presence, what you're marketing, how you're doing it, your presence, either social website, social media website. You can do paid advertising. There's a lot of different networking you can do, email campaigns, customer surveys. So I wouldn't necessarily just use these based off your clients for how do you think I'm doing. I would kind of put some questions in there on what kind of information do you wish was available to you as far as insurance. What kind of products do you wish I offered? Because maybe you offer them, but it's something you're not pushing, and you're going to find out, okay, I have a huge market for people looking for dental or whatever the case is, right? So it might give you some ideas of some other product lines that you can kind of pivot to. As far as website, so disclaimer, you can build it or you can pay someone to do it. There's lots of different sites out there, I'm sure, and not to plug any, specific place over another, but there's the GoDaddy ads I'm sure everybody's seen. There's a lot of website builders. We have people here that we can direct you to who specialize in building insurance websites. But if you don't have a website, I would highly, highly recommend getting one for multiple reasons. Many people are using the internet these days to search for agents. It is going to give you a lot more inbound calls, right? And things coming your way. And I kind of put at the bottom with air quotes, free-ish leads, right? Obviously, you're having to pay for the website, maybe someone to build it, keep it active, make changes, but it's going to be sending a lot of traffic your way that you're not out there buying just, leads for, right? It's going to create a lot of buzz around what's going on. When you do this, you're going to want to make sure it is optimized for search engines, and there's a lot of different kind of things that goes into that. So you can even go ahead and Google, right, search engine optimization in Google, and they will have their own starter guide for it of what to look for if this is something you're doing yourself and you're doing your own website. If you're hiring someone to build this for you, definitely something I would ask them about, right? Because there's a lot that goes into that. Part of that's making sure you have certain keywords or phrases, in titles, headings, URLs, things that are going to pop up and actually be relevant to what you're selling, right? Making sure your content is getting updated, quite regularly. Making sure that you're adding either articles or blogs or infographics or videos, right? All these different things that you keep plugging these keywords into. So when someone goes on Google and they type in Medicare agent, right, in Seattle, you're going to be one of the first people that pops up because you're going to have all this stuff that these search engines are looking for to move you towards the top of the list, right? A few things I would do at the very least, if you're not going to go into a deep dive into that, is make sure that you have some kind of way for people to request quotes from you and have it ask for some general information, right? To call them back to start with what they're looking for, whatever the case is. You don't want them just to have to call you or email you, right? Have this built into your website. I would definitely, if you have social media, have it integrated somehow. So it's going back and forth, whether it's just links they can click on to go from one to the other, whatever the case is. Make sure you do have links to, if you do have a blog, you do have this, whatever the case is, right? The more relevant, good information you're getting to people, the more likely they are to come and view stuff. Make sure they have ways to get to that, right? Don't make it a, treasure hunt for them to have to go out and find all your different areas. Kind of consolidate everything together to be able to make it easy to jump around, okay? And then also have a sign up there for them to, if you want to actually make a newsletter or whatever the case is, kind of email, for them to easily just opt into it. Okay. Another good thing to have is yes to texting when they're signing up for requesting a quote, right? All these things that are going to help with compliance stuff, but also hopefully keep giving you a bigger book of people to call. All right. So as I mentioned, having all this stuff kind of tied together. Okay, so social proof is basically referrals. It's people going on there and giving you ratings, reviews, whatever the case is. I stole this, you know, basically off a page from Google. It's pretty open, everybody can see it, right? And it's one of those things where basically you have reviews, okay? There's a lot of research that goes into this, and it's one of the things that where people are basically 88% likely to trust other reviews online, okay? So that's up there with asking a friend, right? Who do you recommend? Most people these days are just as trusting as when it comes to strangers on the internet giving reviews as they are to looking at, out towards friends or family. Friends and family is obviously a tiny bit higher, but it's pretty close, right? 9 out of 10 buyers are likely to purchase something if there's positive reviews. And you can probably think of many instances where you've been on Amazon or somewhere else or Googling something and you find yourself looking at the reviews real quick. Okay. Another thing I highly recommend, don't lock or exclude all negative reviews, right? If I look at something and I see 1,000 reviews and they're all 5 stars, my guess is that they're just taking out all the negative reviews, and I'm going to be just as weary of that company as someone who has a 3.8 or a 3.5 rating, right? It is more important to address the negative reviews in a professional manner, right? Saying something like, I'm sorry, we reached out or we were closed that weekend, whatever the case is, right? So that way, when someone goes in there and they're looking at the reviews and they see you got a 1 star, and they see you replied in a professional way and it was something that was outside of your control or whatever the case is, right? They're going to be like, look, this person's just complaining, right? Everyone's going to have the one offs. They're going to have someone who's just angry for whatever reason. That speaks volumes. It goes a really long way to, you know, go on there and be able to actually explain a negative review or to reach out and try and correct it, right? What they don't want to see is the company being like, well, we did this and you were wrong and blah, 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 blah. Okay, next. I'm going to go somewhere else, right? So if you get a negative review, it's not the end of the world, right? It's okay. Just make sure you kind of approach it the correct way after the fact. So social proof, huge thing to have. You're going to want to make sure that you look at Google My Business profile. Make sure it's up to date. Make sure you have your hours, all that good stuff. You're also probably going to want to check Yelp because even if you haven't created it up and someone's left a review about you on there, it's there. So make sure that's all up to date and good to go. I know this sounds like it's just giving you guys more work, but I promise this is one of those things that you're going to have there that when people are searching for agents or whatever the case is, they're looking at. Whether you're adjusting it or fixing it or not, they're going there. Okay. And it's not just the younger crowd, it's everybody. Social media, right? Instagram, Facebook, the list goes on and on and on. This is another really good area where you can have some marketing for essentially free, or you can buy different things and push different things depending on how much you want to get into it. But it's an area where a lot of people are using it. As you can see, even people in their 50s, 65 plus are getting on there. A lot of them are checking it multiple times a day and going on Facebook and just different areas, Instagram, YouTube, wherever the case is, right? They're getting on there and they're looking at stuff. This is something I stole back from one of my Facebooks that I had. Excuse me, I was a financial advisor, right? And one important thing to do is having informational articles or posts, not just pushing products or sales, right? You want something that's going to get shared and reshared and clicked on and moved around. That's going to help people kind of give, you know, good content that they're going to read. And then they're going to look at who posted it. And then they will come to you to get stuff that way, right? It's a really good option as far as making sure that you're getting a lot of this kind of passive marketing out there and just generating buzz or views for people to come and call you. And then a lot of times what they do from this is hopefully you have, all your information set up and up to date so they can contact you. But they're going to go do a Google search, right? And they're going to find your website and they're going to do this and that. And it's going to keep kind of building and building and building and building, right? So it's an area where while it does take some work, the return on investment is really strong, right? And as I mentioned, you can do it for free, or what you can do is you can start to pay to boost ads, on both Facebook and Instagram, right? You can do all kinds of different options that are going to allow, promoting things, pushing things to different markets, different areas, and getting it in front of people. And this is, like I said, you really want it to be good content, not just come buy life insurance from me. Okay. People get blasted with that all the time. They're going to want to see some kind of article or information or whatever's going on that they can share or that's helping give solutions for things. And I know this does sound like a lot of work, but if you want to, right, there are different companies out there that you can actually pay that set up basically schedules, and they have everything as far as compliance checked off for what you can share, when you can share it, right? All this different stuff. And you just put on the calendar, oh, this looks fun. Oh, it's Insurance Awareness Month. Let's put that in there, right? And they will put all this on your site, your different social media areas. And like I said, you don't have to worry about compliance, right? Cost is going to vary based off of who you go with, but there are people out there that do this for you, right? Big companies, you can Google search it, right? So there's a lot of options there. Or if you don't have the funds and you're starting out, this is something you can do yourself. Or if you just don't want to pay someone else to do it, right? And the only downside to that is it is going to take some time because you do have to go in there, you have to build it. Luckily, these two platforms are integrated. So most stuff you share on one, you can just hit a button to have it share on the other. As far as doing things like boosting or promoting, you can usually do it on both. The cost is going to vary a little bit based off of, how big of area you're trying to boost or promote to, how many times you do it, all that fun stuff, what kind of account you have. But it's an area where you can do it, right? And like I said, it's not just younger generations, right? 87% of seniors are going on social media daily. Of those 87%, 93% are going on Facebook multiple times a day. Okay. So that's a huge percentage when you're looking at things like radio streaming services is only 25% of seniors, right? TV streaming around 25%. Not that you're going to go take out ads on radio or, Netflix, but you could, right? So there's different areas of things you could push and go for as far as paid advertising. Another really kind of prominent one is direct mail. That's something that does resonate really well with the senior market. It's not horribly expensive, so it's a good thing to push out there. Like, hey, you know, open enrollment's coming up. Are you ready? Right? And you don't have to get too in depth, but it's something they'll respond well to and probably give you calls. Okay. Another one, which I'm sure you've all seen different agents on billboards around town, not necessarily the worst thing ever, either, right? Depending on what you're pushing, what you're trying to sell, what you're really going for. Obviously, you do want to track that return on investment, right? So you would need a way to say, what has you calling in today? Oh, you saw the billboard. Cool, right? Because you don't want to just pay for this and then maybe you're getting a lot more people calling in, but you have no idea why, right? Maybe it's from your social media. Maybe it's from the fact that you've just been an agent for a while and you're getting more referrals. You need a way to track what's actually working so you can either adjust it or completely get rid of it, right? You don't want to keep paying for things that aren't working. Another option, obviously, which is, tried and true, is print ads, right? Finding out what people are reading in your area, especially that demographic you're going after, and putting some kind of ad in there. Obviously, with all these, there's going to be some compliance stuff you're going to have to look into depending on what you're trying to sell, what you're allowed to say, right? All that fun stuff. So don't just go out there and, buy a billboard right now without looking into what you're actually allowed to say. But there's some different options there, which are kind of nice. So one of the things I really prefer to a lot of this, obviously, I love the website, I love social media. Like I said, I try and transition off of buying individual leads as quickly as I can. For a lot of the times when I was a financial advisor or running my own insurance shop, just because you get a lot better return on investment. It's easier to build those relationships, but I understand the need of having to get leads at some point. So obviously, I'm not saying don't do it at all, right? Just have a good game plan when you do it. But for me, local presence and referrals is huge. So as far as local presence goes, a lot of it's going to be networking. You can join BNI groups, Chamber of Commerce. You can create your own networking group of, maybe you have a lawyer, a real estate agent, whatever the case is, of things where you're able to kind of share leads for each other. Hopefully, where you're not, stepping into each other's arenas is the most ideal situation. But if you do, just coming to some kind of understanding of, okay, I'm only going to touch life and Medicare, you can have PNC, right? So that's a really good thing to have kind of in your back pocket, right? That local networking group. Another thing is giving back to the community, right? Finding different things where, one, you're getting to help people, you're getting to help make a better community. Two, and this should be kind of the lesser of it, but you're also promoting yourself, your agency, right? Because there's research out there that shows around 90% of customers are willing to switch brands if it, or agents or whatever, if it helps support kind of charitable causes, right? If it's building a better community where you live in, okay? It's just a really good thing, and it gives a lot better image of not only you, but your business, right? That it's out there helping, that you care about the community you're in. And for most things, especially in the US and certain states and cities, right, people want to support locally as long as it's not an astronomical cost difference, which in this case it won't be because all insurance is, within the same ballpark of each other, okay? So if they can actually support the local community, a lot of them are willing to, especially if they see that you're giving back to it, right? Things like setting up, you know, youth teams, and maybe it has your agency on the back of their shirt, whatever the case is, right? Just getting your name out there. Plus you're getting the benefit of helping kids play sports or whatever, it is they're doing, right? It's a way to get some advertising for you to help build some leads coming in, but also to really help out your community. So it's a great thing to do. Also, when there's little different trade shows, fairs, whatever the case is, right? And this is something you may not want to do depending on how far you are in your career, but it's a really good, cheap way to get out there and just kind of be a local presence in the community, even if you are really well established. It's a great way if you don't have a huge budget to spend, right? To get out there and set up a little booth or tent, getting out to the senior communities, colleges, local businesses, and seeing if you can give some kind of seminar or educational, seminar to their employees or students or, residents, and get out there. And when you do this, you don't want to push buy this, buy that, buy that. It's going to be, like I said, more informational. And then at the end of that, most of them are going to come up and ask you if they can get it from you, right? Or if you can review stuff with them. Okay. So it's a good way to get out there that you're not having to really spend a bunch of money, gas, maybe some materials, which obviously can get through us or the carrier, right? In your time. Very simple to do, very effective, and it helps really build a lot stronger relationship with them, right? Which is really, really good for keeping clients, okay, down the road. And then once again, referral system. We've got into it a few times, but it is something that I just always try and keep, just putting it in front of agents because it seems to kind of slip by as a question that doesn't get asked enough. So as I mentioned earlier, metrics, right? Ways to track different things. They are something you have to have in today's world, right? A way, and honestly, they've been important forever. But when it comes to keeping track of website clicks, views, different things like that, it's a little bit more complex than it used to be of just coming up with, okay, I called 100 people, 25 of them bought that, here's my closing percentage, right? Pretty easy to figure out. And another thing I'll say on that really quick is when you are buying leads and you're figuring out what you're actually closing on and how good that percentage is, do not exclude the ones that you're pre-qualifying, right? And by that I mean you call the person, you talk to them, you decide that they're not really a good deal, it's not going to fit, whatever the case is. You go on to the next, but you don't count that as one of the no's, right? You don't count that as one of the leads you bought that didn't close. A lot of agents do that, right? They'll be like, oh, I'm closing on 80% of my stuff, but they're kind of limiting what that 80% is, right? Remember that you're buying all those leads. It doesn't matter if they're relevant or not, right? And you want to make sure that those non-relevant ones are in the total cost when you're looking at whether or not that lead source is working, so you know to keep going with it or not, right? So make sure you're taking all that into account because your return on investment is going to be huge, right? You're going to want to figure out what is actually working, whether or not it's worth spending that money. Right in line with that, right? Return on ad spend, right? Are these different areas that you're kind of broadcasting, whether it's promoting, different things on Facebook, whether it's buying ad space here or there, is it actually working? Are you seeing people come in the door at the very least? And of those people, are you closing on a good percentage of them, right? So maybe you put out an ad somewhere and you see 1,000 people call in and you're like, wow, this is amazing. That was totally worth the money. But you only close on one of them, right? Because one of them is a good fit. Maybe that's a great idea for the ad space that you took out, but maybe you're doing it in the wrong place, right? So looking at kind of those different metrics, the numbers that are coming through is going to be very, very important in a lot of different aspects. And there's a lot of different things out there. So one thing is setting things like Google Alerts, right? It is going to let you know anytime online that someone's talking about your business, what's going on, right? So that's a good thing to have, especially if you have a website or social media presence. Using different tracking tools. So some free ones would be Google Analytics. Uber Suggest comes to the top of my head with Google Analytics. A little more complex to use both of those. Definitely going to be a little bit of a learning curve, but they are free. So might be worth the time to get into it. There's some other companies out there that are a lot more user friendly and kind of do a few more options like Moz, SEMrush. I'm trying to think of any other ones. But those are going to cost you money, and I think it's around 150 to 200 bucks a month, right? But the plus side is they compile all this, they put it all together, right, and they send it out to you. Very easy to use. But then you can look at things like, okay, what's the engagement on my website? How long are people spending on this page? What are they looking at? Where are they going when they come in here? What's working? Maybe I need more of this. What's not working? Maybe I need less of that, right? And just different areas of what's going on. And then you can see, okay, I have 1,000 people coming in here. They're spending a lot of time here. When they go here, they're actually requesting a quote from me. Okay, because like I said, you want to have that integrated in there. Finding out what's actually going to work. Okay, and it's a really easy way to come up with goals of what you're trying to achieve, not only in sales numbers and money, but maybe of what counts as a successful, venture into ad spend or pushing this or pushing that, right? How much do you really want to see on that investment coming back to you, right? So all this is stuff that luckily there's tools out there is pretty easy to track because doing this, like I said, with a pen and paper or a calculator is going to be pretty tough, right? And some of this is going to be almost impossible, right? But it gives you a really, really good foundation of what's actually working, right? Because I talk to a lot of agents who have very successful businesses and they're doing great, but there's a lot of areas where they haven't really looked at and reassessed what's working and what's not. So maybe they're doing great, but they could be doing a lot better. Or maybe there's some kind of slow decline that's going to really come up and, catch them one day, and they're going to be scrambling to fix it, right? So there's a lot of different areas there where you can look at stuff and, look at forecasting trends, what's working, what's not, right? Can I get this better, right? Can I put in less money here and still get the same results? And using these tools, since they're out there, is a great way to do that. And it also really breaks down things of what's coming as referrals, organic searches. So anytime searching, someone's on Google and they see it and they come across your page and click over, it's going to show you kind of what's coming from where, right? Which is a very, very great tool. Right? So CRMs, customer relationship management tools, something that, and like you can see, I took this one off Integrity, right? Is very underutilized. I don't care if it's on Excel. I don't care if you're using a CRM like this. Wherever you're using it, make sure you're using it. It is a way to track, right? I got free leads down at the bottom, but a way to go back and pivot and sell to different people, because different people are going to be in different life cycle stages. And by that, they're going to need different products, right? So maybe you are mainly, a Medicare shop, right? And that is what you sell. And you have this giant book of people, but you also have your life license, right? That is a huge free area where you already have a relationship built to go back and start trying to sell final expense, right? Or to do an email campaign to them about that, or to actually call, right? Or to bring it up, right? So there's a lot of different areas there where you can use these to cross sell, where you have books of people to be able to go back and push different products based off of what life stage they're in and what they might actually need as far as products. It's a good way to forecast what your book of business is going to need down the road as far as products. And it's a really good way to keep all those old leads that you bought that didn't pan out. And you just make sure you ask them, hey, is it okay if I call you back in 6 months or a year? Right? I know we kind of get your business now, but I really still like to try and get it. To keep them kind of in there and in the spot where you don't have to keep buying leads consistently forever and ever and ever, right? And it's an easy area for you to track your wins and losses. I did this many quotes. I only had this many people apply, right? So there's a lot of different areas you can go in there, no matter what you're using as a CRM, but definitely utilize it. I feel like it is very underutilized. A lot of people have a way to track, but they don't really go in there and look at stuff. All right. Bottom line. So it's kind of just a quick recap, right? There is a multi-million-dollar business on how to be the best seller out there. People buying books, going to seminars, all this stuff. And I feel like it really comes down to, 5, 6, 7 things. There's some little caveats you can put into this, but one, and most importantly, add value to your client, right? And that is going to vary from person to person. One person may want their agent to be, a listening someone they can talk to who's going to ask them about the grandkids or the kids or the dog, right? And that's another place where CRM's good because you have all these notes of, hey, how's Jack doing, right? Oh yeah, he had a baseball game, right? And you're building this relationship and adding value that way. Some people are just going to want quick, efficient, not much chatting. They're just going to want a low price, right? Being able to meet that, right? Everyone's value of what you can really add is going to be different. And learning through those questions, like we talked about at the beginning when you're starting that conversation, you're going to get a good idea of what kind of person they are and what they're really wanting. That's going to keep them around with you, right? And even when you get a lot of no's, if you're doing it this way, I have gotten many, many referrals from people I didn't write insurance for, just by the way that I handled the conversation and the quote and the process, and they keep calling back right down the road to see if there's somewhere I can help them. So adding that value is going to be huge, right? Making sure that you're figuring out what they want, what they like. Okay. Number 2, creating a presence. I strongly feel like you should have an online or social media presence because it is very important these days. But also, for me, building a local presence is really big, right? Making sure you're part of that community, you're out there every day. Because as an agent, more or less everybody is a potential client. Right? I don't know how many times I found clients standing in line at a grocery store who just you start talking to, you have a smile on your face, maybe you're wearing a t-shirt that has your business name or whatever the case is, right? And just chatting and going from there. So creating that local presence is going to be huge, right? Being part of that community. Number three, building relationships. So this kind of goes with those first two, but it can also be networking, right? But you really want to build relationships. For me, I treat all my clients like their friends or family. I'm going to take care of them. I'm going to do the right thing, right? Even if I don't get the sell. So, for instance, final expense, if it doesn't make sense financially and they would have more money in savings over 10 years, I'm not going to push that final expense sale, right? And it will save a lot of headaches down the road for me, but it's because it's not right for them. It's not the good fit, right? Just doing the right thing. And I think this is really important for longevity of agents and their agency. So you're not going to run into all these headaches, angry people down the road of, taking the win now versus what's right. Because if you take the win now, those people aren't going to come back, right? Their family's not going to come back. Their friends aren't going to come back. All the people that read the review or rating on you aren't going to come, right? Versus if you do the right thing, they're going to give that kind of word of mouth to friends, family. They're going to leave those ratings and reviews. And it's just going to keep coming and help building this kind of passive pipeline of leads that are going to come to you, right? Number four, I use the buzzwords, but Kaizen and Lean Six Sigma. Basically, what I'm saying here is complacency kills, right? I don't care if you're doing hundreds of millions of dollars in premium or you're doing 1,000, right? Constantly reassessing your business, your marketing plan, what demographic you're going after and why, finding ways to streamline and make things more efficient, right? Is always an option, even if you feel like you are at the top of your game. I promise there is always something you can make more efficient that'll save money or make it easier for you or give you more time, right? There's always something that can be tweaked to be a little bit better because this is a constantly evolving landscape, right? The market is changing, the products are changing, right? Laws are changing. So there's always something that can be looked at and tweaked or reworked, and it's something to do at the very least every year, right? Annually, if not kind of every 6 months, every 3 months, right? Just go in there and have some kind of plan of, okay, I'm going to look at all this data I've collected and see what's actually working. Or it's been 4 years, I'm going to go in here and see what's going on, right? Jump in there, look at stuff, find ways to constantly keep improving on whatever it is you're doing as far as advertising, marketing, even your conversations. Like I said, there may be some habit that you've gotten into that you haven't noticed that has worked so well for 10, 20 years, but maybe it's not resonating as well with some of those younger generations, right? And maybe it just needs a slight tweak on how you're saying it. And, your closing percentage will go from 25% to 50%, right? Just finding these different little areas because it will help. And I promise everybody has something, even me, right? We all have something we can tweak and make better. And then the last one, obviously numbers, right? The more people you get in front of, the more presence you have out, whether it's social media, locally, wherever it is going to help bring in numbers, even if that's buying leads. And like we talked about, do spend the time to obviously look at ways to lead conversations. I have a love-hate relationship with role playing. Some places I've worked, they call it real playing, right? But it's a good way to get in there and kind of work through some things that you're saying and how you say it. So it's a good way to do it because, like I said, you want to be out there cutting down a tree with a chainsaw, not with an axe, right? You want to make it easier for yourself. You want to increase your closing percentage. So that way, when you're talking to 100 people, you're closing on a lot more of them, right? You can still get the same amount of numbers through, but it makes more sense to get through and actually close on more, right? So with that, like I said, we put in a whole bunch of information. Hopefully there's something you took away that you can use today. If you have any questions, shoot me an email, give me a call in the office. There's a lot, kind of down the rabbit hole you can get into each one of these subjects. Off topic, I love fly fishing, but that's me. So I just want to say thank you for being here. There were some questions. We'll follow up with you guys after because they're a bit specific, and this has been running pretty long. But thank you for everybody for being here, and we hope to see you at our next webinar. Bye.